I got Lucas McGill here. Tommy Lepore here from Blue Springs South. Brett Moorfleet. Hello everyone, welcome inside the Red Earth Production Studios for this edition of YBMcast, powered by Game 7 Baseball, game7baseball.com. Fall ball. They got one more tournament left down in Lake of the Ozarks, and then headed toward fall ball. So if you're, interested in continuing to play through the fall, make sure you get your team together, get yourself set. Go to game7baseball.com. They got tournaments starting after Labor Day weekend all the way through October. So check that out on game7baseball.com. Had a great season, enjoyed it a lot. We still have our scholarship that we're going to be giving away, so be a lot of fun with that. But make sure Dave and Dave do a great job. Make sure you get into a fall tournament this season. Today on Prep Baseball Talk, I have to my right gentleman Brett Graves from P3 Pitching or Performance, right?
Yep. Premier Pitching and Performance.
There it is.
Can't forget the weight room. The strength guys will be upset with us.
Exactly. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. It's been a little while. Since our off-season talk there, so it's good to be back on.
It was in the off-season, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Golly.
Towards the end of it, though, we were just about to get into high school baseball there, I think. So
you're right, because they were practicing.
Yep.
They
just started. Yeah, that's right.
Oh my gosh.
Seems crazy that we're talking about fall ball already too. Can everybody take a minute to appreciate that? Like, I just told my wife like a day or two ago, I was like, oh my God, like July's almost over, Our summer, we run a summer league at the Car Shield as well, PCDL, and I started looking at the calendar. It's like, man, we only got like 3 or 4 games left. We only play 3-game series a week, So I was like, holy cow, where did the summer go? We're about to the next week's the end of July, and we're done, So
I know.
It was a good summer, but it went by fast.
It did. Crazy. Yeah, that's curious. I was been working with Joel Anderson from STL Sports Productions. I know he's been doing a lot of the video for you guys. Talk a little bit about that. That was something you did. That was the first time this year. Yeah. How'd that go for you guys?
Yeah, really good, really good. We've run the league for a couple years, and we continue to pick up steam with it. I think we continue to get more players, get better players, and the players that come in there. I think it's a direct correlation, direct effect, because the players that are coming are having a good experience, getting better, and things grow like wildfire when you just take care of that. So this year, we've been working with Joel to live stream all of our games this year. It's been a really good time. We brought a few new coaches into the mix too that have really just kind of taken the reins on that as well. And kind of taking this concept, I guess, that we conceptualize, at P3 and the whole model of it. My college summer baseball experience 12 years ago, was very much like you either stayed on your college campus and you just worked out, you didn't get an opportunity to pitch in any games, or you went up to one of these college summer leagues, which could be a fantastic option. I had a fantastic college summer ball experience. I already threw 92. I had gotten drafted out of high school, so I was in a situation where I really needed to be out in front of scouts. I already had kind of those, those skills, if you will, that were going to get me drafted. I needed to learn how to execute my pitches better, sequence better, and control and command the entire game, through the 5th and 6th and 7th innings. And the biggest thing I think we talk about with some of the players that are maybe trying to decide between a couple of those options is, if you feel like you have those tools and you need to go showcase them. Our league's not a showcase league. We market our league as a development league.
I like that. Yeah.
It's solely focused around the player. The pitcher is never ever going to throw too many pitches in an inning. It's set up much more like a minor league spring training game, where if a pitcher gets to his certain pitch count in an inning, coach just yells roll it, and we go on to the next inning. Everybody's arms are the first and foremost concern there. We make it competitive. We make small games within it. We keep score. We're keeping stats. We got umpires. Everything's the same. It's just like a minor league spring training. If anybody's familiar with that, which I know. there's probably not a huge, definitely more familiar with the major league ones.
The ones on the backfield,
That's right, the backfield ones, absolutely. And that's what it is. But that's why those are set up that way too, because all those games matter, not selling tickets.
Yeah.
When you're selling tickets, you are at the liberty of the fan experience, right? We're not selling tickets to our games. The gates are open. Anybody can come watch, and people do.
Right.
We get a handful of parents and people in the community come out and watch it. But there's no concession sales. There's no kind of extracurriculars that the business side kind of maybe muddy in the water on the baseball side, and that always seems to me, to have a negative impact on the player. And there's a lot of instances where, especially in professional baseball, like. First and foremost, it's entertainment. If the fans weren't there, you don't have a job. If there's not the excitement around the major leagues, it's not what we know it to be, right? So that's first and foremost always in a situation like that. Our league is definitely more tailored towards the player, the development, and totally set up to help them in their journey, because now they can come play a 3-game series with us, and the other 4 days of the week, or if they're a pitcher, they're pitch their Monday, and then the rest they're back at the facility doing their training program, and not on a bus traveling, getting good sleep, eating really well, recovering really well, getting a recommended healthy pitch count workload in, getting all of their lifts in, very scripted, very detailed, ultimately to help them get back on college campus as best shape that they can be. And I can be the first one to attest both of my summers. Like I said, I had a great experience. It worked out really well for me, especially my second summer up in Rhode Island. It's probably what put me on a track to get drafted the way that I did. But I came back to campus pretty beat up and needing some rest, and so ultimately the goal for this is helping those guys get back on campus in the best shape they can possibly be, to win a job or impress a coach.
So we opened up in 2019, and basically there was a void in the area. I mean, we saw that there was an opportunity to have a retail store where people could come in and actually touch and feel the tangible object that they're buying.
There was some things you said within that, and folks, we're going to get to this because one of the reasons that I'd reached out to Brett, there's so much going on in the summer, but I saw a tweet that you put out, and we're going to get to this because you've got a new app. We're going to put this out called Boost, and I want to get to that. But there's a couple things always intrigue me when you're talking about these things that we'll come back to that I think are within this. And as you said this, when I was looking through the information you sent me, triggered and the thought process I think behind this. But one of the things always was interesting to me, my son pitched. He pitched in a small college, but one of the things that we talked about all the time was how to construct an out. And you said pitch sequencing. Yeah. And so that triggers in my mind. Mm-hmm. I think there's a certain. Everybody wants velocity. I know velocity there's nothing wrong. It's a good thing, having to be able to throw, that 95 plus, or, you're sitting there in that 92 to 95 range. But don't get lost in the velocity, because I think sometimes we've done that. And what gets lost in the velocity, in my estimation, is the ability to construct an out. Sure. And I think that goes to pitch sequencing, correct?
100%. It all boils down to identity. And if you don't know the answer to this question, to how do you get your outs, then you're stuff is fleeting, eventually that'll catch up with you. I feel like it evolved for me through the years, from level to level. I wouldn't say that I truly nailed down my best course for success, like my best strengths. Not just what I felt comfortable doing, but what also my data and metrics said that I was really good at, right? Because sometimes those things don't coincide, right? Like the example for me was like my curveball was really good, high swing and miss, but a bigger shape break pitch like that's harder to throw for strikes, right? I liked going to my cutter, which was small and had really high contact rates, but really like low exit velocities, right? So when they hit it, they weren't hitting it hard. It was breaking a lot of bats. But obviously the data analytics can show us and tell us that obviously if the bat doesn't touch the ball, you have a higher chance for success. So me at that time, 25, 26-year-old pitcher, like I didn't learn those things until after I had already made my major league debut. Like those are things that, that's where it caught up with me at, like I got to the major leagues and I saw that to regularly, consistently get the best hitters like that out in the world, I need to, not be wasting any time. I'm not good enough to waste any time. I wasn't throwing 100. I wasn't throwing,
right.
I needed to lean on my best pitches the most often. And that's probably the one question that we always ask our players the most, and we always kind of say it kind of with a grin, because most of the time when I ask it, I know that there's a pretty good chance that you don't know the answer to this question. That's probably why I'm asking it, right? Because I, through context clues and conversations, I would know if you knew the answer to that.
Right.
But and all of our coaches, I actually steal that one-liner right there from one of our awesome experienced coaches, Jason Imicus. That's his like one go-to punchline of like, how he asks players like what their identity is. To me, my wording maybe before meeting Cuss would be say like, well, what's your identity as a pitcher? Who are you? What are your strengths and weaknesses? But I think to get to the root, question there, it's like, well, how do you get your outs? If you understand that, if you understand that and you mix that with good quality stuff, then we're talking about something.
And I think that, as we're talking about, and we talk about youth development a lot, especially in the 9 through 14 range. Mm-hmm. And there's no real, I think, identity at that age level. I think those are things that come much later. But the discussion being had.
Yeah.
And so these kids understand the language of baseball.
Sure.
So when you
I think at that point it starts with fundamentals.
Right?
Commanding your fastball to both sides of the plate, or top and bottom of the zone, or something about fastball command, something about being able to throw an off-speed pitch for a strike, and as the player gets older and tools start to develop, then the conversation shifts to, well, what are your best? Because every kid could get up there and try to throw a changeup and try to throw a slider and try to throw a curveball, and we see that a lot,
Yeah.
and that's why that question gets posed most of the time. Just to be frank, is because we'll see a kid come in there, throw a bullpen, he throws 6 different pitches, and it's like, dude, you're 15 years old.
Yeah,
how in the world do you have 6 pitches already? Because you didn't throw 1 and master it,
Right.
and then throw 2 and then master it. I tell kids this all the time in there. Our coaches are constantly harping on this, is that you've only got 30 pitches in the bullpen. Your time is just fixed. So anything you were doing, if you took your time divided by 6, all of those things are going to suffer and be average. If you took your time divided by 2 pitches, those 2 pitchers are going to be much better off, And people think that the best version of a pitcher is the one that's got 6 pitches. They're in a rush to get to that, and that's absolutely not the case.
And all I can go back is on my experience and some of the experiences I've had with other players that I've known, but my son in particular, because that a 2-seam, a 4-seam, and a changeup.
Right. 100%.
And you threw them all for strikes,
Mm-hmm.
and you threw one to get to the next one, to get to your desired result.
Absolutely.
You start, don't let the hitter on top of the plate.
Mm-hmm.
So I love what you said,
Yep.
both sides of the plate.
Yep.
I think so much in youth sports, and especially in high school, if I talk about this, if I've got an approach as a head coach, I'm going to stick my toes on the
Oh,
line, and I'm never going to think about the inside
Absolutely.
pitch
Right.
because we don't throw on the inside anymore.
We definitely don't condition our kids to even think about that. Like, we allow them, the catcher, just to sit up, down, and away because it's comfortable and convenient. You know,
Yes.
that, like, if a kid, especially if he's even sniffing plus velocity, could absolutely dominate players on the inside part of the plate. But as you get older, I think that there's some elements that obviously are unique about this at youth levels, right? But I've had conversations with people who are major league pitchers, successful major league pitchers, that have below major league average velocity.
Mm-hmm.
And they argue that it's more important for them to throw inside than it would be for the harder guy because the effect that it has on the hitter, right? When you throw harder, you have more room for mistakes, more room for error. That's what
Agreed.
velocity does for us.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important in our game. That's why everybody likes it, because you have more room to mess up, okay? That's bottom line. That's all it is, right?
Room for
If you
error.
throw 100, yeah, and you miss down the middle, you got a better chance for success than if you throw 90 and you miss down the middle, and that's just the fact. But, you know, the slower the pitch gets, the more important it is that the hitter has to protect the entire plate, because the swing to make contact, quality contact, on a pitch to drive the ball to right center versus the swing, you know, an outer third pitch versus the swing to drive the ball to left center
Right.
on an inner third pitch are two totally different swings, and you can't do both. You can't do both, especially as like pitches get better.
Yeah, you got to take away one side of the plate or the
That's
other.
right. That's all a major league hitter is trying to do. They're trying to eliminate pitches or eliminate sides of the plate. If they can do that, their chances for success grow incrementally.
One last thing with this before we move to the nuts and bolts of this, and because in your speaking and when you're talking about development, and the last thing I think is so fascinating. I love the metric part or the display part that they're doing now on especially MLB, where they talk about arm slot.
Yep.
And you watch. I love watching Clayton Kershaw pitch. Even in his, you know, you talk about a guy that, you know, he may get to 91 here and there.
Yeah, right.
But that slider on the back toe.
Right.
But when you
watch
watch
how much Clayton Kershaw pitches inside too, especially the right-handed hitters.
Right.
Because he knows he has to.
But what's always interesting to me is the arm slot. The ball is coming from the same place every single time. So the plane of the pitch starting is in the same spot. So that to me is, I think, a main ingredient in having success when you're throwing multiple pitches. Is your slider starting is the same place as your fastball.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's pitch sequencing 101 right there, you know? And I think that a lot of people are very intrigued by that topic, you know, pitch sequencing. And I'll say that when I was younger, probably shifted for me somewhere around like the start of professional baseball for me, you know, 23, 24. So basically like college age and lower. I couldn't wrap my head around how, you know, anybody in the big leagues at that time for me was Adam Wainwright, you know, a big Cardinal fan in college, and watching Waino strike out 200 plus batters in a season, and he's not throwing but 91 or 92 in his starts. Well, how's he do it, you know? And yeah, it could be anybody like that. Kershaw is a, you know, prime example. Now they've got plus stuff, they've got plus command.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of factors that go into it, but I do think that's a common like thought concept, is that like if I'm lacking stuff, how do I strike people out? Because the only way I ever really understood how to get strikeouts at that age was just by throwing harder or throwing a nastier slider, and it just doesn't work that way, you know. But that's what I think it's almost, Brian, I'm not kidding. I think it's almost gotten worse. You know, like I said, that's 10, 12, 15 years ago for me. I think it's only gotten worse because of how much we pump kids with their training on, you know, velocity. That's obviously the king, and that's like we call it a prerequisite for promotion, right? It's kind of the gateway into the level you want to play at, right? And it happens for everybody at different levels. Like I remember getting told in upper level minor leagues that, you know, after a successful season, my average velocity that year was like 93, that I didn't throw hard enough, you know? And now I was pitching back in the games, and we all know what a major league closer looks like, and they're probably not wrong, you know? But tough for me to hear, you know, nonetheless. And at some point, you know, there's millions and millions of players that have heard that at whatever level that they were at, right? That they wanted to be at, didn't get the opportunity. Well, why not? It's like, well, how can that be true? I had a sub-2 ERA, you know, like, but that's how we evaluate players. I don't know that's necessarily right. I don't love it, you know. Obviously, it's affected me, like, personally too. But I also don't love it for the player that goes out and throws in their college season and, you know, doesn't get drafted, even though he had a lights out year because
it's a 170 ERA because he throws 89.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. And it's silly, right? Like, to me, looking at it big picture wise, it's silly. But that's how we use analytics to try to project. So kind of to circle it back here, pitch sequencing wise, you know, to me, to be able to pitch sequence, you have to know your identity, like we talked about. You have to know your strengths and weaknesses, right? You have to be able to repeat like a consistent arm slot release and pitches, right? Because if one of my sliders moves very horizontally and then one of them moves vertically, like, you have to be able to repeat those.
Yeah.
You have to develop quality stuff. You have to be able to repeat it with decent command, right? And if you can do those two things, then we can start to have this pitch sequencing conversation where you start to manipulate the hitter's eyeballs and they're not able to see, you know, what's coming as well. They're not able to anticipate because you can throw multiple pitches in multiple different counts, and that's where strikeouts come from.
I like that. And to me, I think that's always been the chess game because, you know, as you said, you know, a hitter's trying to eliminate a pitch or a portion of the plate, and you're trying to work to that weakness or where he's not looking. And that's where you see some of these big league hitters. You're like, well, how come he didn't swing at that? He wasn't looking for that pitch. You know, I mean.
But at that stage, too, I think that people don't appreciate probably these scouting reports that these major league hitters get. They're getting stuff, and they're taking 500 at bats. So at that point, you're totally playing percentages. You were a professional gambler at that point. You got all of these data and analytics. I'm serious, right? And you get all these hot zones, and this dude's just 82% of the time throws a slider in a 1-1 count with a man on second. Like, that's how deep it gets, you know? And then, so I'm going to go up there. I know these situations. I did my homework. He throws a fastball right down the middle. Whole world watching him on TV says, what in the world are you looking for? But they have no idea that, you know, the thought process that goes behind it, you know. And you know, there's some instances, too, where the guy just, like, got caught, you know, in a bad situation. But, you know, I think if people understood maybe the depth of those scouting reports, they'd get why some of those things are, like, just seem so odd, you know. And then also, too, like, the guy's percentage of how often he throws back-to-back pitches, right? Yeah. And then even back-to-back-to-back pitches, because I remember being a kid watching Manny Ramirez, like, take 3 pitches right down the middle and, like, go back to the dugout. He doesn't look mad at all that he just watched 3 fastballs right down the middle. But I guarantee in that sort of circumstance, too, Manny's a really smart hitter, too. Like, he's gotten some data on, like, what this pitcher does, and he totally just went against his norm and all of his percentages right there. And you know, that's how guys are, like, developing approaches at some of those upper levels.
My first thought process to that was many years ago. I'm watching a documentary. I grew up a Dodgers fan. I'm from Southern California, and I remember where I was when Kirk Gibson hit that home run. Yeah. And, you know, later as I'm watching, you know, this, he's talking about it. Scouting report. You know, Gibson's on one leg, and you think, how did this guy do that? And boom, just what you said. And I heard him talking about it. And he's going through the sequence, and he works it full. He works the count full, and he goes to get back in. He'd stepped out of the box. He goes to get back in, and he calls time. And he said, I stepped back, and all I could hear is the hitting coach and us talking about the scouting report. Eckersley, 3-2 count, backdoor slider. 3-2 count, backdoor slider. And he said, sure enough.
Especially in leverage counts like that, man. You get big time tendencies. I'm sure I had a bunch too because
right.
Oh man, yeah, absolutely.
Because you're in.
If it was a 1-1
moment.
count and you were left-handed, there was about an 85% chance you were getting a cut fastball from me. Like no doubt about it. And I'll tell you too because I knew that was probably my greatest chance for success too. So unless your hot zone basically was just beaming red the inner third of that plate, then I was going to throw it. So
and I think that's so interesting, and that was my first real indication of like, oh my gosh, that's something else.
Yeah.
So Bomey sat on that back door and hit it out, and it's history, and everybody's going, oh my gosh, how'd that happen? I can't believe what I just saw.
Yep.
Well,
if he throws a fastball inside right there on him, he's probably just absolutely done for.
Yes.
But the percentages told him that was most likely what was going to happen. And those are the little bitty wins that ultimately prove the success for a guy like that when we're talking about a game that's as refined skill-based wise, especially at that level, like baseball. So
with all this development you guys are doing, you launched this app.
Yeah.
Called Boost. Talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, man, I think it's been an awesome journey here. We've been working on this probably for over a year now, conceptualizing it even longer than that. I definitely have to give a huge shout out to our team that has kind of helped put it together. Noah Junis is probably the coach leading the charge on it, at P3 for us. The guys we've had help Ryan and Reed that have helped develop it, code it for us. They're definitely bringing it to life, and I think it's going to make a huge impact for our players currently right now, as it sits. But we've got such big aspirations for it. I feel like it's 10 or so % done of what we ultimately want it to be.
Looking to do.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot more to.
Within the next
really pack in that.
No doubt. Within the next month, there will be several updates going in. Within the next 6 months, there'll be, probably 3 or 4 times as many updates as that, going in. So we've got a lot of it built out that is just not like public yet, essentially, right? Like we had to develop it internally first, and the guys that train with us have seen bits and pieces of it. Our college partnership teams, Duke and Mizzou and Memphis, like they all got to see a lot of these reports that we started generating from it, within this past year. This is our way to help, showcase it a little bit better to the players, so that they can kind of keep track of it and monitor it and understand maybe the depth or the magnitude of the data, like kind of what we're talking about of like how we're going about trying to help them.
How to even use it, right?
Absolutely, because I feel like this is one way that P3 really separates itself from other places that you may go, and there's fantastic coaches everywhere, man. And I would say that's the first and foremost thing on anybody's path as a baseball player is those relationships with your coaches. They don't just make you better baseball players, they change your lives, and I've had some of those in my life that have been just super impactful into who I turned out to be ultimately as a person, throw baseball aside, but baseball too, obviously. Right. And I would never suggest that not being the most important thing, right? I do feel like we've got a really good staff at P3 of difference makers in our building as well, that when given the opportunity to build those relationships, they've been really successful too, and obviously I got to give my team that shout out. But this is one thing that I will say that there's places, there's more fingers on my hand than places you can go to see data like this and have it be presentable to you in this fashion, much less the magnitude of the data we're collecting.
I liked what you said because, the aspirations for it is to affect life and the journey, not just as a pitcher, but as a person. Yeah, and absolutely. So I think anything that's successful, personally, it's my view. People, can, I don't know, somebody may have it, but I do believe, and the reason I'm sitting here like this talking to you, we'd never met much, whatnot, but I knew Coach Perkins many years ago when my son was young and the twins were young, we met up and talked and got to know Coach Perkins' relationships and through the years. And when we started doing this, he's like, heck, and people that you get to know, I think the relationships that you build are so important to how you have success in life and how you treat people, right?
Yeah.
Because like you said, this app, it's cool. These are things, these are functional things for people to work towards. But I love the fact that you added that, because then you can't escape the relational context of why the data is there,
right,
and the people that are helping you understand the information and utilize it to get better, right?
Mm-hmm. I think a big initiative for us in this past year or two, I think it's always been impactful for us, but tops of our priority list is player education. Because we've got all this data, and I can dissect and understand all that data for you.
Yep.
For a player. But if they don't know what it means, it's so fleeting, and it doesn't really matter. All they did was kind of come in and nod their head and do some exercises and become buddies with the coach.
Right.
Like player education. This as far as like the life and journey statement there goes, like to me, that's probably one of the biggest things. As far as baseball is concerned, like the education on, who you are identity-wise, okay, as a pitcher, what you need to get better at, what your goals are, and like that ultimately is going to help us dictate what you need to develop into to reach your goals, right?
Sure.
Because if your goal from the jump is you say you just want to do, just think about it in a simple velocity context too, and we're pushing the bar on that every freaking year. But if you want to go pitch in the SEC, I'll pull you up some data about like what an SEC pitcher looks like and put yours side by side with it, and you'll see, like what you're up against, and just education, and not to say that we're not going to do it. You can't do it. It's just you need to know where you're at. You need to know what your goals are and what it's going to take to get you there.
Right.
So,
I can't. That would be remiss, because the first time, I knew you played for Coach P, but Chris Craddock, hooked us. I've known Chris a long time as well, and we've done a lot of things with the sports barn and with the Gators, and that's what I'm saying. The relationships and. I see Chris, and we still, so I think those are things that are real, and that's where you guys, outside the sports barn, the P3's on the other side of that. So I think those things are interesting, and I know they're getting ready, the sports barns, to open up another place in Illinois, which is cool. Right?
Yep. GBA has been doing some
cool
really
stuff.
Cool stuff this past couple of years here. Chris runs a great program along with Seth over there. We're really close with them, and have a club partnership with them. We train all of their Missouri players over there, so it's been a really good blessing, I think, to get to work with those players and those coaches, and that's definitely a group that's very dedicated to development, their players, their families, and building the community.
Trust the process, right?
That's
what
right.
it says up there.
That's right.
So let's take a look. We got the video side, the first tab we're looking at here on the video. And so talk a little bit about what the video tab is for.
Yeah. So the video tab there, that tab that you have pulled up right there is specifically for Edutronic ball release. So for our data, when we're collecting the data, we're collecting ball flight metrics, and that's what some of those graphs and plots and everything that you'll see. This specifically right here is attached to a particular pitch, so you can see the grip and release and the way the ball comes out of your hand, the seam orientation that produce those metrics, right? So you can see it, familiarize with it, and then try to repeat that ultimately, So that specific tab right there, that's my beautiful looking hand. I'll never be a hand model, that's for sure. But that's a ball release video paired with the data, so you can actually click that data tab there next to it and pull up the specific data for that pitch, so you can put kind of two and two together, again, back to that player education piece of it, because we'll have metrics that we talk about, right? For me, a little bit about my identity. It was a four seam, we call it vertical break, right? It's got that ride, it's got that hop effect, right? You either got that or you got a sinker type of guy, right? I was a four seam guy with vertical lift. So I knew there were key metrics in that that I would like to be, above an 18, on that, right? And that's where you get into kind of the elite category for vertical lift, right? So if I had one that was or wasn't, I could, kind of attribute it there to the grip and release and what went wrong with it, what went well with it, see it, visualize it, and then try to, replicate it.
Very good. So the next, you talked about the process documents. You got the tab that's downloadable documents that address critical areas of your journey. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so being a good pitcher is got so many different aspects that go into it. Being a good athlete, being a good athlete at anything, right? Like you're not just talking about training, right? You're talking about recovery, your ability to recover, your nutrition, right? Your sleep, your protein intake. Some of the images that you can see on there, like 30-pitch bullpen routines, right? Like your mental performance, your mental approach to your training. We have some other things on there that give kind of sample throwing programs and sample lifting programs. All of our athletes currently have very hyper individualized programs based off of their assessment data. But inside of this documents tab, now, even still from when I sent you this, like there's new documents that are in there for our specific players. There's a nutrition guide. There'll be a recovery guide. You've got your 30-pitch bullpen routine, a mental performance checklist. So things to help kind of connect the dots between the training service that we're doing and providing, and you actually turning that into on-field success and outs ultimately, because that's what we want for our players.
Right.
Because I do think that gets kind of like lost a little bit, where people and coaches or whatever, if you get so focused on that training aspect and maybe lose sight of like what the goal is for it. We just don't want any of our players or coaches or anybody to lose sight of like what that goal is, or ever miscalculate or judge what our goal for them is too. Like our goal for every single player is that you go out and have a better season and accomplish the goals that you set out to do. And the worst thing that could happen is we have a kid that come in and has success training with us actually, and then he goes out onto the field and doesn't see it roll over to the field. Like we're trying to help them connect those dots. We don't want to lose sight of like what the ultimate goal there is for everybody. It's not to be a good bullpen pitcher. It's not to get a bunch of velocity.
Right.
Like what's your velocity in the game? Like it's a hot topic, I think. Especially with all the social media videos of guys doing pull downs or bullpen velocities, right? Like I see some of that stuff. I'm like, who cares? Obviously, it's good. And if it translates, it's generally good.
Right.
But we want to be very cautious. This is a term thrown around in baseball that we're not developing 5 o'clock hitters, right? 5 o'clock hitter goes out and bangs balls off the wall, hits balls over.
I was thinking.
And then 7 o'clock game time comes around and he's striking out, right? Like we don't want good trainers. We want good baseball players.
I have to say this, and again, I do this with Mitch all the time, because the opinions and views of YBMcast are not necessarily those of the person sitting next to me or the support or the sponsors of our show. And I always say that because this is what I think, and I am not afraid to say these things, because I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, but this is just what you said is, I think, a reality. We've started doing a lot of high school baseball. We're seeing I think there's a lot of high level players in the GAC for one, and I see kids that are on these videos and the big time stuff, and you go out and you walk the bases, everybody's doing the cha-cha around the bases. But man, did you see how hard he threw? I don't care.
Yeah.
I honestly, I would rather see 5 or 6 ground balls.
Yeah.
And I go back to the old Bull Durham adage: they're more democratic.
Yeah, that's right. Strikeouts are fascist.
So, I think, again, though, you can't just. I think we lump things. We let these pendulums swing, and we never find really any balance in anything. And everything is, one way or the other. Develop the velocity to your ability, to your physical ability. and allow them to learn the things, I think, and let the cards fall where they may. I think that's the best you can do. And I think, it's tough because what you said about, and we'll get back to this. I'm sorry, I'm off on a tangent. Brain goes that way. And it's tough because I think the last time we talked, you'd said something about that. You'd said, you're not throwing hard enough because I'm a back-end bullpen guy.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. I get it, but I think it's like I said this on the show Tuesday with Mitch. I said, strikeouts, why are they so high? It isn't because pitchers are, we think, it's just velocity. No. It's acceptable. It's okay because he hit 40 home runs. Yeah, but he's hitting 210.
Yeah.
I think that's ridiculous.
Right. I
that's
personally,
just my opinion.
No, I personally agree. But the reason it's like that is because we are rewarding that in the game.
I agree. And
from major leagues on down, we're giving guys hundreds of millions of dollars for hitting 40 homers for 210. So that's going to affect the valuation process that's all the way down through the game, all the way down through recruiting and everybody following suit. And I think a lot of that too, like there's people that go against the grain with that for sure. And I don't have any sort of like proof or metrics to show whether that's successful or not. But there obviously are still some very much so like traditionalists in our game at all levels.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't know personally if I believe that that's genuinely good or not.
Right.
I know the approach that I would take. But it's always, man, and I say this very often about P3. We pride ourselves about being baseball guys, right?
Yeah.
You have to be able to know and understand what this high-level like biomechanical data means to have it make a difference for a player. But you have to know how to communicate it. You have to know how to translate it into getting outs. Our sweet spot is that if this is a data scientist and this is a old-school baseball coach, like we aim to kind of like live in that middle,
I think
where we can communicate it. We don't lose sight of what the ultimate goal is, right? Outs, right? And so, you throwing 3 miles an hour harder and throwing the ball off the backstop is completely irrelevant. You're not going to get a pat on the back or a hand clap from anybody at our shop, about that. Now, can we work with that? Absolutely.
Sure.
Like, are you going to get more looks because of that? Because that's the way the game evaluates players. That has nothing to do with me, my beliefs, and the more you sit there and like, the more anybody tries to maybe complain about that or pose, opposing views to that, it doesn't matter what I think. That's what the game is doing, right? It doesn't matter. Like, you want my opinion on like what I think's flawed in it? I'll tell you. You want my opinion on like how you're going to get evaluated? I'll tell you. And there'll be some stuff that are parallel, and there'll be some stuff that's very perpendicular. So
right.
Yeah,
I love that, and that is as true as it gets.
Sure.
Exactly. Right, wrong, and different.
Sure, is what it is.
And I hope that, and I usually do. And I think you hope that the pendulum sometimes will swing and balance itself out. And I think
it always does. It always does. Like our game goes from, you watch it in the major leagues, and it goes from sinker ground ball guys to four seam velocity guys, and like everything always kind of comes back around.
I'm looking for the big ephus guy.
Yeah. Seriously. I mean, you Darvish and some guys are already kind of starting to do it. Not the way not the way El Duque used to do it, but definitely, I think that the game always kind of comes back around like that, and because you can also go back to the 70s or so and look at how impactful velocity was on the game then with Nolan Ryan and everybody that was like leading the charge on that front, but then zoom out and look at the 90s and Greg Maddux and what everybody was like doing then, like not to say that like we weren't enticed by these young Kerry Wood, folks throwing the ball and striking people out like we did. But, I think you can look back. You can zoom out right now and see an ebb and flow of it, just based off of like what trends like were being set. And that's all it comes down to is like averages. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We have a pitch grading model inside of that says, based off of your data, here's your scouting score for your pitch, right? So a 50 is major league average, 20 is the low end, 80 is the high end, right? That's like the scouting scale that's used across baseball. So ours is measured off of like true ball flight, and traditionally like a scout would show up to your game and he'd bring his notebook and he'd watch me pitch, and based off the way he felt, he'd write a number down that he felt like this is based off of the true ball flight, and it's weighted against averages in the major leagues.
Gotcha.
So it's weighted against like what the current major league average is, and we all know what's successful in the major leagues is outliers. You can't throw average pitches because hitters see so many of those pitches, right? So the higher the average velocity climbs, the devaluing of velocity in the game takes place, right? You're starting to see way more guys throw so many more high percentage of sliders and breaking balls, and it's because they probably still throw 95, 96. Like Lance McCullers is perfect, person. He's throwing now really nasty sliders, and he uses that the highest percentage of the time. But it's all weighted off of averages, and the more a hitter sees of it on average, right? Like if you come out of the bullpen on Monday and you're throwing 95, and then I come out of the bullpen and I'm throwing 95 on Tuesday, and then our Wednesday guy comes out and he's throwing 88, well, the more they get conditioned to seeing those pitches, that's what swings the pendulum, that's what makes the impact. So
the next one you got on here is the community.
Yeah.
Where you house discussions, live streams. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And I know you do a podcast yourself. So is that where some of that
there'll be some content? Yeah, there'll be some content like that. We host a lot of open discussion and open forum style conversations about impactful topics, within about pitching and pitching development, right? Like last fall, every Saturday we hosted a free open 9:00 classroom setting about a topic, right? Open to anybody in the world. You didn't have to be in P3, whatever. Come and listen, and if it was a topic you were interested in. And so this will kind of be our attempt to continue to push that forward. Because like I said, there's so much other information that's impactful within a pitcher's journey that needs to kind of be encompassed like with our training that we provide, to ultimately help them reach their goals as much as and be the best version of themselves. So that's what we'll aim to do, some of that, whether it's a conversation for members. I talk about it much like a kind of a Reddit board, we talk about sliders, and somebody's struggling with a slider, he posts something on there and he's got 16 answers before the official verified answer comes through. It's well, try this.
Dude, try this.
So, yeah. And then just a place for us to be able to our guys hosted a workload management seminar type of educational day with a lot of our college athletes. My hope is that someday we've got a bunch of remote players and players who are out traveling who couldn't be there in the facility to hear that conversation that need and want to hear it, or coaches too, where they can click on that and get straight into that discussion virtually and not miss a beat.
Lastly, I thought was the one that was intriguing, and I was looking, just at the different things you had on there, but was pitch design, your pitch design tab. Yep. It looked like, the mad scientist lab, right?
That's right. Oh, yeah. That is the first tab there of all of the ball flight data that we collect at the facility, right? So we collect data in 4 main areas. We collect data in a pitch quality, right, ball flight standpoint. We collect it biomechanically, your pitching mechanics on the mound. We collect mobility data, and we collect strength and power data, right? So that's the first installment of the data that's going in there. It's mostly, we started there because that's mainly what the players want to see most regularly, right? They want to keep up with how their pitches were doing. And obviously, that's the outcome. That's the desired outcome, right? Some of the other things is how we get there. But, if you're connecting some dots here, I just told you all the things that are going in there within the next couple of months, So all of that will be, kind of up there, visible for people to see and able to kind of export PDFs. A lot of our players are getting heavily recruited by tons ton of places, and we're trying to help them the best that we can. They can log in right now and export a bullpen to send to a college coach, the snap of a finger.
I love this too because, and as we're talking about these things, and when you're looking at data like this, average Joe Schmo for the most part, you got. I think it's interesting because even the kids, what am I looking at? You've got to understand the data and how to read it, because the last showcase we did with PBR, which we were at the Sports Barn. It was their February one, and I always ask these kids, how is technology helping you? And how long did it take you to understand how to understand the technology?
Yeah.
And the kids were really honest. There was a couple of them that said, "Man, it really is." I forget who it was, but it's taken me about a year and a half to really understand what the data is and how to. Yeah. So that's the challenge in itself, correct?
For sure. I mean, just to unravel it a bit here, like, I think it took me like an evolution of like 5 to 10 years of seeing it every single day in my professional career, and still even then, like, knowing how to apply it and how it like really makes a difference. There's two main ways, right, that data makes a difference for a player, right? Either an evaluation tool, and that's what you see from PBR and Perfect Games, and all of these, exposure-based companies that are helping these players like get to college and get exposure that way, because a coach is using that as an evaluation tool to say, kind of like a prerequisite for promotion, like I talked about, like where are you out on this relative scale, or they have some type of idea of a player type that they're looking for, and they use that to kind of funnel it, right? And the other way is development, and that piece of it is way more fluid and abstract and harder, I think, to comprehend for people, right? Because I think that almost every one of our players, I bet, if you ask them some of those metrics you can see on the screen there, is this a good slider?
Right.
They'd be able to evaluate it probably pretty good. Like they would know decently if it was good or not, because they've been coached, on what certain metrics are. You ask them how they're going to get better. That's where it's like, well, I'm not real sure, the conversation kind of unfolds there from a development piece, and that's the biggest difference. Obviously, like, we're not hosting showcases and events at P3. Right. We're on the development side of that.
Correct.
And why the education piece of it is so important for us, because if that player leaves us, or whatever, he's out playing during the season after the off season's over, even if he's on a full annual plan with us and we're still continuing to help coach him and help him through the season, if he doesn't understand like what those things are, then it'll be very easy to like lose track of it.
It's the adage, and I use it all the time, power's knowledge, but it's it isn't really. It's only powerful if there is understanding, if there's the application of the knowledge with the information, and I think that's key. And I love what you guys are doing with that, because I think that shows that right there.
Yeah.
If you can't apply what you know,
it doesn't matter,
it's of no value.
It's just an evaluation tool at that point, and yeah, I mean, it's useful for that in some
maybe
in
useful
some
for somebody else.
Yeah, sure,
but not for you.
Sure. And look, I mean, there's we train players from 10 years old to 36 years old.
Oh yeah.
There's players that want to know and care more about what their data is in high school than there are some professional players that come in with us. Now,
that's a product maybe of age too.
I don't know that it's potentially. I don't know that's that big of a deal. You're just always going to be at the liberty of like who's around you helping apply that, because there's plenty of people that come in there, they know the data is impactful, and that's why they come to P3. Okay,
gotcha.
But they want somebody to digest it and then give them the things to work on, right? Like as a player, I don't need to know what my metric is for, my lead knee extension velocity. Okay? I need to know if it's good or bad, right? I need you to help me pinpoint things that I need to get better at, and that's what it does. It helps you target deficiencies, right? So that process ultimately, and that's why we offer different things, right? If you wanted to come to P3 and just get an assessment, right, and get your data, here you go. Now you know where you're at. You used some of the best tools in the country to do it, and you know what you want to go do with it. By all means, go do it. Way to go. We'll applaud you,
absolutely.
and no problem,
Sure.
right? The way it evolves is that you want us to take it, do the dissection, the analysis piece of it, build the programs, and then obviously ongoing like coaching there about like how to make those tweaks or how to implement it more on a day-to-day basis. Like there's people that want to do that, and they just want you to tell them what they need to get better at, and tell me the exercises and methods that I need to do those, because the data doesn't matter. Like really, that's where I sat as a player. Like the data didn't matter to me. I don't care. I want to know what it means and what I do from it. What's the action that needs to come from it because my, whatever was deficient, and so you don't necessarily have to know that your data is really good or really bad or whatever. You don't need to know the depths of the data. You need to know the action that comes from it, right? So you have to have somebody that can collect it, and you have to have somebody that can dissect it. And then from then, all I care about as the athlete is what do I need to do? What all that matters, because the data without action is evaluation tool. It doesn't matter, right? Like the action is what is the sweet spot there.
That's good stuff. Congrats.
Thank you. I actually have one more thing to add about the video tab too.
Oh, sure.
So we have two different video functions in there. The piece that we talked about, the video tab, I don't know, maybe I didn't include it in the images there for you. The video tab there, is attached to the pitch design tab, right? So when you see all those graphs and those data plots, you can click play right on one of those pitches and pull it up. The video tab that we have on there is a full education curriculum. You've seen other people do it and call it their certifications, their coaching certifications, their pitching certifications, right? This is P3's pitching certification course built into this app. And some people charge $1,000 or thousands of dollars for it, and it'll be included in our app and included with every membership that we have currently. And will be included in this, for the duration of it, because that's, like I said, that's where this concept all started, was from player education, right? We prescribe, we script out all these different drills, methods, exercises for these players to do physically, right? This is us doing that from a player education and mental side of the game, where now we have a progression, right? Like, it's not just an open video bank, like you've got to watch the first video before you can see the second one, right? And it walks you through the entire pitching development process, so that hopefully by the end of it, it's just like taking a pitching course from P3. You've got everything that we know and believe to be true about pitching, and it'll transcend like much further past the training purpose, the training services that we provide, and that's really one major function of it, of us attempting to stand in that gap to help you figure out how to turn, quality training into outs, because we all know that that's what matters most.
Exactly. If you can't get them out, man, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, mercy. Yes, indeed. So, again, Brett, thanks for your time. I appreciate you coming on, man. I saw this and I was like, oh, this could be a fun conversation. And it was. I hope everybody out there enjoyed. If you got some comments, anything you want to say, leave it in the comments below. We do appreciate that. If you like what we're doing. And if you got a question, Premier Pitching and Performance?
Yep. PremierPitching.com. You can schedule a call with any one of our coaches at any time. On there, there's a big bright yellow schedule a call button on there now for everybody. So
PremierPitching.com. There you go, folks. Go check it out. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. Listen, if you like what we're doing, please hit the subscribe button right there if it's the first time you're here. If you've been watching for a while, haven't subscribed, please do that. Hit that dinger next to it. because I know he doesn't like this, but around here we hit dingers. That's for my buddy Mitch. So that'll get you all your upcoming notifications for what's coming up, and we appreciate you supporting Youth Baseball Midwest. Folks, thanks. Have a great day in the Lord. Remember, pitchers, some advice for the pitchers?
Strike one.
See?
Strike one.
There you go. And hitters, I know you won't like this one either, but hit them where they ain't, right? We'll see y'all next time.